What was going through our mind initially was, what exactly has happened. I mean, you just don't know until someone's examined him. You just don't know what the full consequences are. When we got him to Stoke Mandeville, they had him for 24 hours to do the various tests. At the same time, they said it was likely that Rory would walk out of there, which was obviously a positive message. We always felt from the beginning that we were being positive about the likely outcome because from the beginning he had feeling in both sides. And that to us gave us hope that he would be able to get significant movement back. Um, but it was going to be a long process. He was going to have to do a lot of work himself. Things don't move in a straight line because you get very positive about I'm moving into a rehab ward, and then the next day you get a urine infection and you're stuck back in bed and you can't do anything and you're miserable. It is a bit of a roller coaster. It doesn't go like that, and you don't know what the end result is. It wasn't going to be an easy operation. It was going to be a 7-hour job, and the risks of things getting worse, him losing movement he might already be getting back, were all there. And yet they want you to make the decision. No matter how much they're worried about their professional liability insurance, you have to push back and say, look, you have to advise us. Because yes, we don't know what the right thing is to do. We tried to really keep it in the present in terms of, okay, this is this week. These are the things that are happening this week. Let's just, take it one step at a time. When we first had him home, of course, he just felt, well, I can walk up the stairs on my own, holding on to the the sort of the side of the stairs. And we were saying, no, someone's got to watch you. Someone's got to be below you until such time as we know you're safe enough. And that was very frustrating for him because he was thinking, well, once I get out, I can just be back to where I'd like to be. And it's not. It takes a long time. I think that he's grown a lot in terms of himself, having been through this process. I was watching a couple of videos which he gave me of him skiing, which are fantastic to watch what he was doing. If you tell him he can't do something, he will try and do it. And I think that's the other important thing in terms of recovery. If you have someone who's very strong-willed and determined, that helps tremendously. The support that you give is very important. Trying to get the individual to be positive about things and to put a lot of effort into trying to help their own recovery. But clearly, the child is going to get frustrated and annoyed at times. And I think one of the functions of the parent is to be there to be shouted at, for them to be grumpy with, because they're not going to be grumpy with the staff or with their friends. They're going to put on a good face for them. But at least just be there to accept that. Realize, they're being fed up. Just take it, accept it. You need to have a break. You need to do other things that can take your mind off it. We had a holiday for about a week, which we'd had booked up several months in advance. And as it panned out, it was actually very good, I think, for us and also for Rory because it started a transition from us being there all the time to us being there less, for him taking on more himself, starting the process of him becoming more independent again.
9 months into relationship, I'd just been made redundant from my job, so I was at home, and Mark was working as a dispatch rider. And that day, I got a phone call saying that he'd had an accident on his bike and that he'd injured his back, and that it was quite serious. And they told me that he'd broken his back and that he probably wouldn't walk again. When Mark had his accident, I was only 18, so it was a lot to take on board. I still had hope that he might get better because I'd heard of people having an injury and getting better. So I kept strong when I was with him, but when I went away in the evening, I would cry and pray that he would get better. I was in love with him, so to me, he was still the same person, so I just wanted to be with him no matter what. I just felt that he needed me to be there and to support him. The initial time when Mark was in hospital, when he was in bed, was quite hard because I'd go in and see him and he'd be quite upset and depressed. You do go through a period of grieving. It's a big change in your life. Mark got a lot of his grief out initially when he was in hospital, and then he was quite positive. So to me, he just acted the same as he was before his injury. One thing I used to think about was not being able to dance with each other. I used to think we'd never actually been out and danced together, and that was one thing I was sad about. I used to think, oh, I wish that we had gone out and danced together, and that we'd never be able to do it in the future. One day he got quite upset and he said, I don't want you to come and see me anymore. I thought that it was all over. I was really upset. It was his way of expressing how he felt. We had to start from the beginning again, really, re establish our relationship. When we used to go out, Mark used to get quite annoyed because he felt that everyone was looking at him. People weren't making judgments about him. They just, maybe look at him because they see someone in a wheelchair, but they weren't thinking bad things about him. The challenges for us were learning to do things in different ways. After Mark's accident, we decided to buy a Winnebago, and we had it adapted so that Mark could drive it. And we went touring around France, and Mark did all the driving. We camped on the beach, drove all around. It's not the sort of thing that I would have expected us to be able to do in those initial stages. And you just need to realise that there are a lot of things out there that you can do. You just maybe do them in a different way. Mark's accident has changed my life for the better because it makes you appreciate things in life more. Maybe you do things that you wouldn't have done before. It made me think that I would like to be a nurse, and I am. I've just in my third year of doing my nurse training at the moment. I'd say to someone in the same situation to just just to stick with it and that things will get easier. It's important to remember to look after yourself rather than just focusing on the person who's got the injury. So it's important to look after yourself and take time out to do some of the things that you'd like to do. I think what pulled me through was just knowing that we'd be together. You might think that your relationship won't survive after an injury like this, but Mark and I are proof that it will survive, and if anything, it makes your relationship stronger.
I was in the army at the time, and I got called into the clerk's office to be told that my brother had an accident and was currently in hospital. It's not something you think about, I don't think, on a daily basis. And in fact, it's probably not something that even crossed my mind before Lee had his accident. I think people clung on to this hope that it was all spinal swelling and just the shock, and they'd wait and see when it came down. And certainly I think in Lee's head, he was convinced that he was going to walk back in at some point. Well, mum and dad all seemed quite upset, so I always tried not to be, not around them anyway, because they had enough going on without me being upset as well. I didn't feel like I could lean on my parents as such, not in a bad way, not because my parents are unsupportive, but again because they're going through their own issues, and I think there's sometimes an expectation that you will react in a certain way. I think the more difficult thing is not necessarily being told that your sibling, your brother, your sister, they can't walk anymore. It's how you adjust, and it's accepting that accident affects you. I spent a long time not wanting to be upset because it wasn't my legs, it wasn't my back. I was fine. I think it's the bit after that becomes difficult, where you adjust to the fact that everything's going to be different and everything does change. And I think I struggled seeing Lee in his wheelchair. I think the biggest thing that got me is his legs. Is when he gets in his car, he moves his legs with his hands. I find that really quite hard. I find it quite difficult seeing how his legs have wasted because he doesn't use the muscles, because he used to be quite into his cycling. There's only a 3-year age gap between me and Lee, so the things that are important to you when you're in your 20s, I can kind of relate to that, and I think my worry came from the bits that you don't think about with people in wheelchairs. So people who haven't experienced spinal cord injury kind of go, great, you can't walk, but your bladder and bowels don't work and other bits don't perhaps work as they should. And I think I struggled with that. It was like, this is it, this is how it's going to be for the rest of Lee's life. And I found that very, very difficult to deal with, and I think avoiding it at the time seemed like a really good idea. Spending time and going away with him, it's kind of helped me understand better his injury. It's not necessarily that he needs lots of help with things. If anything, he wants the opposite. He doesn't want help with things. The biggest thing that helped us throughout us all was finding that thing that the injury couldn't change, and treating Lee as Lee still. Not Lee in a wheelchair, not Lee with an injury. He's still Lee. He's still the same person he was. Lee came to terms with what happened to him and how everything had changed long before I did. I would probably say I only recently got to a point where I was happy, and I think that came once I'd stopped avoiding seeing the situation. If I want to go and do something, I'm probably going to go and do it, which sounds a little bit of a cliche, but it really has shown me that Lee got up one morning, he had plans, he'd saved money, he had a house, he went to work, had a car accident, and that changed everything. I think what happened to Lee could happen to anyone. I know you can't live your life like that, but it certainly made me go, actually, I'm just going to go and do what I want to do. So it's potentially probably maybe a little bit more selfish, I think, in that respect. I'd certainly say find some common ground that the injury can't change, if that's at all possible. Certainly I found not treating that person particularly differently to how I'd always treated them helped me, and I assume it helped Lee. Never told me to stop doing what I was doing, and usually it would if there's a problem. My main avoidance actually came when Lee was discharged, and I think that was a mistake for me. So I think maybe not avoiding situations you may find uncomfortable may be an idea, because the more you face them, certainly for me, the easier it became. Yeah, I think it's up to you to find a way that's acceptable for you to deal with that injury, and no one can tell you what that is.
We woke up in the morning, got ready for school, etc. My dad went off as usual to work. I think it was just as I was coming down the stairs to go outside to get the bus, that my mum got a phone call that said, Dad's been in an accident. Where my dad had his accident was the main route to school, so all the school buses went past that junction. We went past, which was quite a bizarre feeling, seeing ambulances and things like that. It was very, very rainy. I just remember driving past and thinking, this is quite surreal. No one really knew that much about paralysis and things like that as well, so we couldn't really comprehend what was going on. I think both my sister was too young and I was still trying to understand. I think even my parents, my mum was trying to comprehend exactly what the sort of repercussions of the accident would be. We went into the hospital to see him, and it was very much a kind of, the most surreal thing was going in and just seeing my dad there, and he looked exactly the same. And so he was just lying in a hospital bed. He didn't have any cuts, any bruises, anything like that. And I remember he was wearing sort of the white compression stockings on his legs, and just thinking that I remember when he wasn't looking, sort of poking to see if he could feel anything, and it was quite weird that he didn't. They said that the spinal cord had been severed and that it's probably likely that my dad would never walk again. It didn't really sink in for a while. I remember just looking at family photos, and just on the wall we have a lot of photos around our house of family, and so sort of pictures of my dad standing up and just thinking that's a weird thing that he'd never be able to do that again. And at the same time, we're quite an optimistic family, so it was sort of saying, well, yeah, now he can't walk, but maybe in a few years he will be able to. Maybe in 18 months he'll be able to. How do they know for sure? I think it's almost like the most important age to have a father figure there. The fact that I wasn't going to see him for 6 months was very difficult. I think the most important thing then was family, friends, and that kind of support, and not being scared to ask. When I went into the hospital, my dad was still there. He didn't look any different. He didn't sort of sound any different. He could still hug me, joke around with me, and it still had the same sense of humour that he did. Everything is still there. Like the family was still there together. I still have a mum, I still have a dad. Having him involved in everything was really important. But I think it probably helped him through his rehabilitation process, and it also helped us integrate as a family again. My birthday was when he was in hospital. So for my 15th birthday, we went up to Stoke Mandeville and we stayed in the hotel that's next to the hospital. But as a surprise for my dad, we brought the dogs up as well. And so I think to begin with, we were worried that they wouldn't know what the wheelchair was, and they'd be maybe scared of it. But as soon as they came in, I just remember Wrigley is one of our dogs. We got my dad, picked him up. He came in, didn't realise the dogs were there. Wrigley sort of jumped up, sort of walked up slowly, and then jumped straight onto the bed next to my dad and jumped onto his lap. And so I think that kind of thing, that my dad was like, well, obviously a lot of stuff has changed, but none of the real sort of core values have changed. I think sometimes seeing my dad upset, maybe when he couldn't do stuff, and that may be just sort of where tried to transfer from the bed to his chair and he'd missed. And I didn't have the strength to help him as much. And now as I've grown up, that strength sort of developed and that kind of thing, but just not being able to help that much or not really knowing what to do. And I think now, simple things we laugh at and we deal with it straight away. But I think at that point it was just going, no idea what to do. I think that was when I was quite scared about, well, what if this happens? I don't know what to do about that. What if this happens? What do I do about that? I think my dad's accidents had a completely positive impact on me as a person. For various reasons, I think my relationship with my father, it's a lot closer. It's been interesting to research things as well. You would assume that a paraplegic couldn't ski, he couldn't scuba dive. We found ways to do both of those. We both used to sing and do musical theatre. We're now in a choir together that's, at the moment, sort of second in the country. It's won world championships before. And I think that was great that we could start doing that together, but then the fact that I could then step away and go to university and my dad now does it by himself. The thing that I admire most about him is how it is his perseverance, actually. It's the can-do attitude, why not? And just being able to share sort of experiences that you wouldn't expect to share with him is just fantastic. It's not that he won't take no for an answer, it's the fact that he just says, right, I'm going to give it a go. If it works, it works. If it doesn't work, move on, I can do something else. For me at 14, it was quite a worrying thing to begin with, just the idea that my dad couldn't walk again, he wouldn't be able to be involved in certain things, but you're extremely lucky to still have that person with you. By the fact that you've almost been given this lease of life still, there's still so much enjoyment that you can have with whether it is sort of finding gadgets, spending the time that you now have the opportunity to spend with that person, I think that's what I would say, that just life goes on and it's a change in life, but at the same time it's an exciting change in life that you can all embrace together as a family.
They put Jamie in traction. He was in traction for 10 weeks, and they said that they hoped, because it was not a complete break, they hoped that the traction would lead to some mobility. I think Jamie realised quite quickly, and it took us a bit longer to realise that things were not going to come back and this was going to be a permanent situation. The realisation was horrendous. You can't imagine. I mean, your life literally changes overnight. And I didn't know. I had never known anybody in a wheelchair, so I had no idea what our life would be like. I mean, Jamie's lying in a hospital bed with these bolts in his head, and I just couldn't imagine what the prognosis would be and how he would ever have a life. There was no hope given as to what the future was like, and no one to talk to see what their experiences were down the road, you know. I don't remember anybody coming in to me and saying to me, oh, you know, this you'll be okay in a few months' time, you'll be able to do this, you'll be able to do that. But maybe they didn't know that. Maybe they didn't know what you'd be able to achieve. I don't know. It affected us quite a lot at the start because we were like ships that passed in the night. Because I was there in the morning and Gordon was there in the afternoon, so we didn't see each other really. And Gordon didn't cope very well with the situation at all. He was very bitter and very resentful for a long time. And I think, again, it was Jamie's attitude that helped. That he wasn't feeling sorry for himself. He was getting on with life. Therefore, we had to. It did affect our relationship. I think it definitely did affect our relationship. But I think, you know, we have got over that now. I mean, I remember driving home from Sheffield with Jamie the day we came home and just thinking, well, Jamie's life's over, but our lives are over as well. Because what's the future? You know, looking after this boy who can't do anything. We spent some time in the flat at Sheffield trying to get used to us all being together in that situation, which was quite helpful. But I still worried about how we were going to manage here. For us to be looking after him again, and it literally was, looking after all his needs was difficult for us, but must have been very difficult for Jamie. I mean, Jamie was in hospital for 9 months and had got a lot of help in hospital, a lot of physio, and had achieved, you know, a lot. But still, you know, he couldn't do much for himself at all. So I could not imagine him ever living on his own, ever having an independent life, ever driving, ever having a job. I couldn't imagine any of that. Jamie obviously realised very quickly his situation was going to be permanent, and therefore he had to make the best of it. And that's what he did. When he came home, he didn't want to be a burden on us, so he decided that he would try and make himself as independent as possible. And he worked incredibly hard to achieve that, and achieve that. It took a long time. He decided that he was going to live on his own, and he applied for a house and got a house. Well, the day he moved out was horrendous, absolutely, because I thought he won't be safe, something will happen to him, and you were always worried that there would be an accident or something, and we have had a couple of instances. I mean, I was proud the day he moved out, but I was terrified the day he moved out. But he got a lot of support again, and has managed to live on his own. So there's been lots of different achievements. When he got his job, his first job, I mean, that was just wonderful. He was able to support himself. And then, you know, he's had quite a few girlfriends, so that's been nice, and, you know, able to form relationships. He has a good life, you know, and I never thought I would say that, but he has a good life, and he's making the most of his life, very much so. There is hope. It's not going to be easy. There's going to be a lot of hard work, and you all need support. You need support from your family, from your friends, but you can have a life. It will be a different life, and it's maybe not the life that you would choose, but you can have a life. Life does go on.